get started, let me just say welcome. Let me say welcome to all of you leaders that are in the room. Do any of you kind of shudder at the title of leader? Does anybody? Okay, just Stephen and a few other people. I know for me, I'll be honest with you, I struggled with the term leader for years and years, even working in the church. And, you know, there are times where I see myself at my worst, and I'm very realistic about who I am. I'm probably a little harder on myself than I should be. And so when I think of myself as a leader, I think, oh my goodness, Lord, do you not have anybody better than me? Because I have a lot of flaws. I've made a lot of leadership mistakes along the way. And sometimes that makes me feel like I should be disqualified. But for whatever reason, the Lord continues to use me. How many of you have made some pretty bad flubs as a group leader? Where you're almost embarrassed to think about that. Okay, yeah. So most of us have. I can tell you at least 2 or 3 examples. When I was a youth pastor leading small groups with teenage ministry, I once put my wife in timeout in the middle of our group meeting because she kept talking to one of our other counselors. That did not go well. So, I warned her like 2 times. I'm like, Beck, you gotta stop talking. Like, I'm trying to keep these teenagers their attention. And finally, I was just like, hey, you need to go to the other side of the room here. That didn't go well. I made a pretty bad mistake. That was like 20 years ago, okay? I've grown a little bit since then. Yeah, there was another time recently, actually during Keys to Freedom, where my wife, we were at the end of one of the heavier sessions, and somebody in our group, we had some really heavy prayer requests that came up, and I trust my wife to pray and to pray well for people. And so I asked her, she was sitting right next to me, I asked her, I said, hey, Beck, could you pray for all of these requests? And she looked at me and she was like, no, I don't think I can. And I'm like, I don't know what to do with that. I looked at her and it was the most awkward moment in our group. So she was having an emotional moment because it was one of those weeks that really, I don't want to say it triggered her, but it really spoke to her, and she was really emotional, and I didn't pick up on the emotional cues that she was putting off. So she told me no, and I'm like, that's never happened before. So basically what I'm telling you is the problem with me and my leadership is not me, it's my wife. I'm kidding. There's a couple, I'm kidding. There's a couple people in the room. Josh Atwell would be one. He could tell you there was one time in our small group that somebody was sharing a story, and he prefaced the story with like, listen, you're gonna think I'm trying to be funny, and I'm not, but I'm gonna tell this story. And I thought he was kidding, and he said something that was one of the funniest things I had ever heard. And he was trying to hold the group together, and I couldn't hold it together. I just kept, like, the more I tried to hold in my laughter, the more awkward it got, and now it's become like the story of legend in our group. And so, like, we've all made mistakes, and some of us are really intimidated by the idea of leading. And some of you love and embrace the role and the responsibility. I know we got some really strong leaders in this room, and then there are others of us that are like, man, call me a coordinator, call me a facilitator, call me a group coach, call me a teacher, but don't call me a leader. But every one of you are leading. You may have heard this quote before, but John Maxwell used to say when he would do a lot of his coaching seminars, he used to say this quote, and I quote this, he that thinketh, this was a proverb that he used to share, he that thinketh he lead when no one is following is merely taking a walk, okay? And here's the reality is that every one of you, because someone has chosen to follow you, in some ways you are leaders. And you are valuable in this church. Even if you don't think you're a leader, if you look around and there are people gathering with you, if there are people that are following you, if there are people that are listening to you, you are a leader here in this place. And we couldn't do groups without you. And so I want to say this thing, and I'm doing a long kind of introduction to get to where we're going. I want to say this thing that you've probably heard 10 times from me in the past, but I believe it, and I know it's true every time I say it. What you do as a group leader matters. It matters. This is so important. And I would go so far as to tell you that your ministry at Crossroads Church may be the most important ministry of any ministry that we have. Now, I know you're probably thinking, you're like, well, what's Chris supposed to say? Like, yeah, he's, groups is somewhere down there toward the bottom. Like, of course I'm going to say it's the most important ministry, but I really do believe that, especially in a season like we are in right now. What we need groups that are gathering. We need people to find what is familiar, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. So I say that because what you do, it certainly has always mattered, and it may matter more right now in the history of our church than it has in any season of our church. We need some familiarity. We need some leadership going forward. And so I really do believe that being group leaders is a very important and a high calling for each and every one of us. And so I want to thank you getting into all of this. Thank you for leading the way, putting yourselves out there. I know none of you are forced into this. None of you have been coerced. Maybe too much. Jake is actually pretty, yeah, he's pretty influential. He may have twisted a few arms, but you do this because you love people, you love God's word, and you love hospitality, and you love the accomplishment that comes through being group leaders. And so thank you so much. But let's be honest, if I can just briefly hit on this, like we're in a really interesting and maybe in some ways a difficult season in the history of our church. The devil has kind of started to throw some punches at us. Think about it. We picked a fight with the enemy through Keys to Freedom, did we not? Like, did we not go to the enemy and basically say, this is what we're doing? We're going to encourage people to pursue connection with Christ, to pursue forgiveness, to pursue, like, changing generational patterns and work through bitterness and all of their addictions. Like, we picked a fight, and if we thought that the enemy was just going to sit back and be like, oh, okay, well, they won. Well, we're crazy. And so the enemy is fighting back. And he's thrown a few haymakers, and it's tough. It's tough that we have a pastor that disqualified himself, and we're in that process of finding the next one. But there's a lot of people in our church that need the ministry that you provide, because the ministry of encouragement comes with what you do as a group leader. And so it's unique right now what the persecution that we're suffering as a church, so I just want to encourage you that saying all of that is that it's important. And so, I really truly believe that it's as important as it's ever been. Having groups, having community, getting people together to study God's word and to pray and to encourage one another. We need some sense of familiarity, because right now there's a lot of familiarity is kind of missing in our church on Sunday mornings, right? Like, we're used to hearing Pastor Dave, and he's not there now. And so things feel a little bit upside down. And groups can be something that's comforting. Think about this in your life. For example, my wife and I, we went to the Dominican Republic last year for our 25th anniversary, okay? So it was a big blowout. We got down there, we spent a week down there, and after about 6 days where you have a language barrier, you're not sure what you're ordering off the menu because you don't speak Spanish. Like, everything feels unfamiliar, and I'm not like a great international traveler. I'm not super cultured. And so we would walk by a restaurant and be like, hey, I recognize those golden arches. Let's go to McDonald's, Like, it's the one thing, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but anybody ever recognize that when everything feels unfamiliar, the one thing you want, the one thing that brings comfort is familiarity. And so the thing that can bring comfort to a lot of people moving forward in this season is the very ministry that you offer, because it feels familiar. And so we're anticipating that the fall semester will be a huge moment for our church. And you guys get to be a part of very important ministry that helps people heal, that helps people rebound a little bit, and pointing people certainly back to the word and pointing them back to fellowship and community. And so all of this is super important. So now, having said all of that, Jake and I are going to share with you, mostly me, you're going to hear a little bit from Jake this morning or this afternoon as well, but we're going to share with you where we see groups going forward into the future. Some of the things that you're going to feel, and you're going to run through the things that you hear. You're going to run it through the filter of your classes and your groups, and you're going to be like, how does this affect me? Because we're all thinking that, right? Like, how does this affect my group? Some of you, you're going to be like, oh, I didn't probably really need to come and hear all of this because we're already doing these things. Some of your groups, there may not be much evolution or much adapting whatsoever. And there might be some of you that you're about to hear what I'm about to say, and you're going to be like, man, that's really different than how I lead my group. Or you might hear what we're saying, and you might be like, man, that takes me way out of my comfort zone. That's not what I'm used to doing. That's not what we've historically done. But I want you to hear my heart. I think you all know me. Many of you are here because I've established, or Jake has established, a relationship of some level of trust with you. And I don't want to hurt that trust that we have established, but I want to lead you well, and I want to lead you into the next season of community. So understand that some of the things that we're going to propose and we are going to make some shifts on, know that our heart is not to frustrate, it's not to dictate, it's not to be heavy-handed. I think if you know me at all, that's really not my style of leadership. Like, I want everyone to be happy. But I also know that when you make change, not everyone's going to be happy. But if you know my heart is to do the very best thing for communities moving forward. Because we are in a different season in our church than when this model was started 7 years ago. And so you have to hear my heart in this, because if you don't, you might hear some things and like, nope, not doing that. I can't believe he thinks that that's what we ought to be doing. I just want you to know that I want to journey along with each and every one of you, because I want you to go along in this process. And Jake certainly wants the same thing as well. So, that being said, I've probably said that being said about 4 times now. Jake and I have made a lot of observations over the last really year and a half, almost 2 years. And the Lord has been stirring things in me, and just to remind you that I'm not like a knee-jerk kind of guy. Like, this is stuff that we have been chewing on and brainstorming on literally for a year and a half. And so anything that we're proposing as far as changes, just know this is not something that popped up in the last 2 months. Like, we're not just bored and looking for a new challenge. We're certainly not looking to frustrate anybody. But we have been praying over this. We've had a lot of conversations. And how many of you came I think it was last September, over at the Ontario Gymnasium when we had the big celebration? Anybody at that? So many of you were there. You know, we teased this almost a year ago to the day. And so this is something that we have definitely been working through and been praying through. And I want to also preface what I'm about to say with this statement as well. Because we're changing does not mean that we have not had success, okay? Many of you have had great success in your groups. You have done exactly what we've asked you to do. And so many of you have played into our system, you've played into our structure and the way that we have set up communities. And basically, if you're doing it in your group, it's because we have either encouraged it or we have allowed it. And so don't take what we're about to propose as, well, everything I've been doing is wrong. I'm just telling you, I think that there is a way for us to move forward in this ministry that is more effective, that I think can be more measurable, and I think will bring us better community, and I think it'll bring us better unity as a ministry and certainly as a church, okay? So when you hear some of the things that I'm going to propose in a few minutes, don't take it as, well, does that mean that I didn't do it right before? Yes, you did. It's just we're in a different season, and we want to measure some different things than what we previously did. And we want to set some different expectations than maybe what we previously did. So, okay, we're right on time, right where I want to be. All right, so here's what I want to do. I want to have you turn in you got these packets right here, right? Sorry they're so long. If I were better at consolidating stuff, this probably could have been brought down to about 2 pages. But I want you to be able to follow along a little bit. Jake, do you feel like you can hang with me on the clicker? If you don't see it on your paper, if you didn't get a packet, we'll have them up here on the screen. There's really not any reason necessarily for you to take notes, but if you want, there should be pens at your table. But I just want you to be able to see this and take it home, chew on it, process it with your spouse if your spouse is a part of your group or your ministry, and then hopefully ask some good questions going forward. So, through a lot of conversation, Jake and I have realized that we've got what I will give credit to him, 3 problem pillars, okay? I knew we had some issues with our current model, and I knew I wanted it to be better, and I knew where we were going, and Jake was like, well, here are the 3 problems that we have that I see, and I was like, ooh, that's really good. So I gotta give credit to Jake. So if you hate this, just blame him too. So, okay, so we got some systemic issues. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time with going over the problems of our current model, our previous model, but I wanna let you know like where this proposal is coming from. So in order for us to know where we're going, we have to know why we're moving off of some of our old model. We had a systemic issue. I have been feeling for a couple of years now that our ministry is what I've been referring to as bloated. We have a lot of groups that are going a lot of different directions. And many of them are great groups. Again, nobody's done anything wrong, but because of that, I feel like we're unfocused as a ministry. And I want to kind of recenter us. I want to kind of refocus us a little bit. And I feel like because we're so scattered in so many group types that we get inconsistent results and inconsistent, like we have inconsistent measurables and all of these things. And so we've had recently no clear metrics for success. And so as Jake and I think about pastoring and leading this system, if you will, or this ministry, we have to have some things that we can measure, and we have to know, are our groups accomplishing these things? And we have not clearly had those metrics as of late. And so we've also felt like we've heard a lot of feedback from people that are kind of new to our church. When they get that semester catalog, that's like a brand new book, right? Like every time you get that, you're like, ooh, this is kind of nice. But if you're not familiar with our church and our structure, you open that thing and it's overwhelming. And so we feel like it's been a little bit of a turnoff the way that we have structured some of our registrations. It's overwhelming, not just for people that are brand new, but maybe for people that have been coming for a while and they're not super integrated into groups or classes. And so it's become a little bit of an intimidation factor. So we got some systemic problems, and then we got a lack, I think, in some of our groups. Again, hear what I'm saying. Just because I'm saying this doesn't mean it's 100% across the board. But some of our groups are lacking like member investment. We have an attitude in a lot of groups of consumerism more than ownership. And so we want to kind of flip that a little bit. So we got a systemic issue. We've got a sustainability issue. We've had not the best clear pipeline for leadership development. Many of you are here because maybe you stumbled into a conversation with Jake and he twisted your arm, or maybe you stumbled into a conversation with me and I asked you to step into something, or maybe you came from another church and you're like, I don't really know how to get involved, but I've led groups before, and somehow you found your way. We need to develop a pipeline for new leadership development. And we feel like this new structure, this new strategy, this new model is going to help with that. So sustainability, yeah, we've had a lot of group leaders that have led, that have been burned out because it's just a lot of turnover, and every semester, you lead a group every semester and it can lead to burnout. We've probably not supported our group leaders as well. So man, this is a little bit tough for me because I'm acknowledging that there are things that we either haven't done well or we definitely could do better. So we've had maybe a lack of support and directions for group leaders. And I believe too, I don't know that our supply is meeting the demand of our church. So when people come to our church, and Jake historically has talked to a lot of people that are new because of his previous position as the connections pastor, he met a lot of new people. When people come in and they say, hey, how can I get into a group? They're not necessarily thinking, how can I get into a 6-week Bible study and then bounce from group to class to class to class, from semester to semester. Most people, when they say, hey, I want to get into a group, and they want to do life with people, and they want to get into a living room. Not everybody's ready for that, I get that, but most people are looking for, how do I get into a group and find my people? Have any of you found your people at Crossroads? Man, is there anything better than knowing these people are in the trenches with me? They're praying for me, they're holding me accountable, they make me laugh, they're there when I need them. We have shared affinities, we have shared memories. That's a really good feeling. And so when people are looking typically for groups, that's typically what they are pursuing after. But what we have created is a system that has a lot of community groups, but what we're seeing more and more is the one-off classes. And there's nothing wrong with those, but again, moving forward, I don't know that that's what we want to measure as success, okay? So, and then we've got some spiritual things, some spiritual problems, if you will, and it really starts with, and I don't mean to like overemphasize this, but I'm being completely honest with you guys, I have felt unsettled for 2 years with the direction that we have been going. I feel like it just it gets bigger, which feels really good because we love to measure numbers, and we have gotten bigger in numbers and bigger in group leaders over the last 4 years, but I also feel like I mentioned earlier that ministry bloat, as it's gotten bigger, it's gotten so unfocused, and I'm like, I just don't feel right about all these groups going in all of these directions. And let me say this as well, as Jake and I, he will definitely defend this and speak and verify it, I should say this. He and I started talking about this stuff a year and a half ago. For what it's worth, Pastor Dave went on a sabbatical last summer. Many of you probably remember that. When he came back, he spent a lot of time seeking the Lord. We were already wrestling with this. I was already prepared to propose some changes to the community's ministry to Pastor Dave so he could get on board with it and make sure we're aligned. He came back, and before I ever had a chance to talk to him, he said, Chris, here's what I feel like the Lord has shared with me, and the word is simplify. And I'm like, yes, we are aligned. Yes, that's what I need to do, and I felt like that was permission for me to move forward in that direction. I still feel strongly about that. Even though Pastor Dave's not here, I still feel like the Lord has been leading in this. And so I've been unsettled for a couple of years about some of the things that we're doing and how we can do better. And so there's several other things, but really that's all I want to. I don't want to beat down what we've been doing. This can feel a little bit discouraging. I get that, and I don't want to do that. And so here's what we've been thinking moving forward. Okay, we got to think about if we're moving forward and we have a path forward, where is this path taking us? Okay, so I want to kind of give you a destination, if you will, and you see the bullet points there, destination goals that are going to drive our path. These are some of our metrics. We're going to figure out how to measure these things. Have we worked it all out yet? No. Is this going to be a perfect transition? No. But we're going to do our best to figure these things out a little bit, hopefully get in front of them before our fall semester starts. So what we want to do is we want to elevate the discipleship making potential for every group through accomplishing some gathering expectations, which we'll talk about here in just a moment. We want to create easier and more accessible on-ramps for group members and group attenders. We want people to know oh, this is really easy to get into a group. I just go to this website, or I talk to this person, or whatever it may be. Number 3, we want to create a culture of commitment to life and community rather than consumerism. We are still going to have some form of what are currently called classes, and I don't want to say too much yet because we'll really start to break this down in a moment, but we're still going to have some form of classes like we have. Because people need a place to get in. So say, for example, only because I know from firsthand experience, Josh Atwell's group, his Monday night group is full. There's no room right now to receive another couple. And so if people are looking to get into a group and they can't get into community groups because all of them are full, we still need to have something to provide people to get into some sort of community. But even those classes that we'll talk about here in just a moment are going to drive toward, hopefully, community groups. Okay. Number 4, establish a process that promotes multiplication of groups and group leaders each semester. I want to make it more intentional to where we are in our groups, we're identifying who could possibly lead another group. And we'll talk about that in just a few moments as well. Provide more intentional training and engagement for group leaders. Historically, the trainings that I have provided every semester are amazing, right? And all God's people said, amen. I'm kidding. Even that's a little untargeted, okay? Because people have been leading so many varied kinds of groups. Like Kim Powell back here, she historically has led a walking group. She gathers people by just going for walks down the bike trail, sometimes in Ontario or Lexington and down toward Belleville. Well, she might come to a training and be like, and that's not at all what I'm doing. So we're trying to create more focus and more unity so that our training can get more specific to group leaders. That's one of the things that we're hoping. Number 6, build a reproducible ministry model that works across campuses and is sustainable as our church grows. You know, when we started this model, when Pastor Doug started it 7 years ago, there was one campus. And now we have this one, we have Shelby, we have Ontario, we have Waterford, and the prison campus. And so like we have really grown as a church, and we need a model that kind of sustains that a little bit better and encourages that, so that when we, in the future, we're anticipating that, you know, we'll maybe start new campuses, we'll absorb other churches, whatever it might be. We're anticipating that that will still move forward. So when that happens, like when Waterford came on board just about a year ago, we weren't necessarily able to go to them and say, this is exactly how you get started. And we want to create that system that says, hey, you're a brand new Crossroads campus, this is how we get groups going really quick, because it's that important. So we're trying to create these are some of the measurables of where we're going ultimately with all of our groups, okay? So I've referred to on the next page, at the top of the next page, or maybe at the bottom of the first page, I'm not sure, proposed gathering expectations. So before we get into the new groups or the types of groups, I'm going to talk a lot about gathering expectations because these are going to be specifically the things that we are measuring for groups. So if you come to me and say, hey Chris, I want to start a group, but it doesn't fulfill any of these or all of these, then I'm going to say, hey, you're always welcome to gather people. But that's not what our focus is. And so I'm going to give you 6 things in particular, and some of these expectations will apply to community groups. Some of them will apply to just catalyst groups, which we're going to talk about in a moment. But basically, these are the things that we want to accomplish at every group meeting, or almost every group meeting. This needs to happen on a regular basis for every group. We want to have prayer be a major focus. We want time for prayer. Now, for some of you, again, been doing that this whole time. No changes there. But praying together as a group is fundamental for drawing near to the Lord and for encouraging one another. We also want to see food and fellowship. You think about some of the greatest times in the church body. Is there not a meal involved?
Yeah.
Right? Okay, now I know some of you might be thinking, oh my goodness, I have to prepare a meal every week now? No, sometimes it might be really light snacks, it might be appetizers, it might be a dessert, just something to gather people around. You know how it feels when you walk into a room and you have a cup of coffee. That coffee becomes your comfort. How many of you need coffee for comfort? Yeah, that's why we serve coffee at our church, because we know it brings down walls for people. Well, when you gather together either in a classroom or in a home, having a little bit of food to just kind of like push around on your plate and, just enjoy can be a real comfort to people. Now, and so when I say that, I'm also saying that my Keys to Freedom group, we had one week in particular where we met in someone's home. We kind of rotated homes a couple of times through the semester, and the host of that home had nothing but like Skittles and Sour Patch Kids or something like that. So they set them out on the table. I'm like, yes, Skittles, They offered something, like it's just familiar. And so it doesn't have to be a full-blown meal. In fact, I would almost encourage against that every week, because it will burn you out. But we want to have some level of like comfort, and sometimes that comes through food. So food and fellowship is an important part of successful gatherings going forward. Bible study is going to be a big part of that as well. We want every group to be in God's Word on some level. And this is in some ways where we've gotten away from that. We've got a lot of groups that do some really cool gathering things, and it's not to diminish if your group doesn't do a Bible study. But again, if we're talking about what is driving discipleship at our church moving forward, God's Word's got to be involved in that, okay? And does that mean that you have to have an hour-long Bible study every week? No. It might be 10 or 15 minutes, but we want God's Word and following along with God's Word, some group discussions to be a part of your regular rhythm, so that people can not only hear God's Word taught, but that they can kind of process it in a safe place. And so group discussion as well. 1 year commitment from group leaders. For some of you, not an issue. you lead every semester. Others of you, this might change things for you a little bit, but again, we'll talk about that more specifically in just a moment as well. And then multiplication. We want to see groups multiplying. And we have not made this enough of an emphasis. I've talked about it in the last 4 years, but I have not really pushed it. I've not really held groups accountable to this. And I've probably not, as a leader, I've probably not given you the structure or the process of how you can do that well. So what we're trying to do is create opportunities for your groups to create more groups. And we're going to push you into that a little bit, and that might be a little bit uncomfortable, but at the same time, again, I'm not a dictator. And so when you see like what we're asking community groups to do, if you haven't maybe accomplished that as a group 1 year, I'm not going to be like, oh, I'm shutting you down. Like, that's not my heart, right? But what my heart is to say, I'm going to push you just a little bit to get that much better, to make your group that much more effective, and then to potentially branch out and build other groups and help our church grow this ministry. So we'll talk about how these play out in the different types of groups. Is everybody with me so far? Okay, it's 10 after 1. Let's talk about the path forward. Let me just look at something real quick. I want to look at my time frame just to make sure I'm doing okay. Okay, the path forward. We're going to have three main types of groups. In the past, we have had community groups, we've had classes, we've had connect groups, we've had core groups, we've had even some care groups. So there's like 5 different types of groups. We're going to pare this down to 3, okay? We're going to continue, obviously, having community groups. Community groups is really what we're after. And it's not to say that if you're not leading a community group, but you're leading a catalyst group that we'll talk about, that you're failing. It's just that we are trying to drive people to living rooms. And to not just living rooms, but ongoing community from semester to semester, from year to year. We want people to find that familiarity. So, community groups at Crossroads. For a brief definition, they are for people who want to do life with other believers and grow in their faith through their relationships. These groups are where lifelong Jesus-centered friendships are made. Life change happens best in community, and this is the best way for us to connect with others at Crossroads. And so some of the bullet points underneath community groups, this type of group, is that the community group leader will commit to leading their community group for 1 year or 2 semesters. Historically, the last 5 years, we've had 3 semesters. We're going to cut back to 2 and really go heavy in the winter, or I should say early spring and the fall. And we want to really go heavy for those 2 semesters and encourage people to get super involved. Summer is always so loose. There are some good things that happen in summer, but everybody's going in so many different directions, and it creates a little bit of burnout for some leaders. And so certainly if you lead a community group and you want to meet through the summer, I am not going to stop you, okay? Like, I want that to happen, but we're also not saying, hey, if you lead a community group, you've got to go, fall, summer, and spring. We're going to do 2 main semesters, okay? So you're going to commit to 2 semesters. Now, most of you, how many of you are considered community group leaders now? Like, you have a group of people. My guess is you already know when you signed up for this, this is not just a one-time deal. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep leading these people. So it's not a big change for you. Now, community group leaders commit to leading their community group for 1 year or 2 semesters. Within the year-long commitment, we're going to ask group leaders to send at least 1 person or couple to start a catalyst group. Okay? And we're talking about catalyst groups in just a moment for 1 semester. Now, let's say you have somebody in your group and you have encouraged them. You've got a couple that you've said, hey, I think you guys could lead a group and you could really help our church by leading a catalyst group for 1 semester. That doesn't mean you're kicking them out. It just means you're saying, hey, for 1 semester, will you be missional? Will you be intentional? And we will save a spot for you. And if you want to keep coming to our group and lead a catalyst group, that's fine too. But we're not saying that you have to get rid of people and kick them out to go start new groups. We're just saying, would each of your groups consider once a year to not only send an individual or a couple to start a catalyst group, but would you receive an individual or a couple into your group? So this forces us to think about multiplication. It forces us to think about there's always an empty chair. We're always thinking about how can we include more people, okay? And so that's another thing that we're gonna ask you guys to do. The group leader in community groups gets to choose the study curriculum with the stipulation of the topic aligning with one of the Crossroads core values. This is no different than what many of you are doing right now. I think we all know you can probably justify, when you look at Know Christ, Grow Together, Go Boldly, any study that you find on Right Now Media, you could fit into one of those core values, right? So as a community group leader, you guys have the freedom to choose the content that you want, so long as there's approval, right? Like previously, when you fill out a group leader application, it kind of filters through us and we either approve it or we don't. It's rare that we don't approve a curriculum, but it has happened a couple of times in the last 4 years. And so you still get to, as a community group leader, pick your content and your curriculum. The next bullet point, group leaders do not necessarily need to host the group in their own home. Group leaders can partner with others who would like to offer their homes, or even allow group members to contribute to gatherings by offering their homes, to open it up and preparing food. In some circumstances, community groups can even meet on campuses, okay? So long as we're asking you again to meet the gathering expectations that we've laid forth. And if that means I'm meeting in, Ken Stocksdale leads the next season, they meet in the classroom here on campus, that's fine. I'm not saying, hey, you have to go meet in your home. Like, keep doing what you're doing, but just meet these gathering requirements or expectations. So sometimes you just don't have a great space and you need a classroom space at one of the campuses. That should be fine. A handful of community groups will function potentially as larger groups that are perpetually open for anyone who wants to jump in. I led one of these types of groups through Keys to Freedom. Many of you had groups that were anywhere from maybe 6 to 15 people in your Keys to Freedom groups. I had a group of 60-some people, okay? And it was too many people. But we wanted a place for people to jump into a group. We didn't want to tell people, no, we don't have space for you. So we did that. It's not ideal, but we did the best that we could with that. We may have some of those groups moving forward as community groups as well, potentially. All right, so what are the gathering expectations for community groups? Prayer focus, food and fellowship, Bible study, and even potentially serve projects. That's something that we want to encourage you guys into. We are going to be partnering more and more with the City Center in particular to provide opportunities. One of the reasons that most groups never do a serve project and they don't live missionally is because they don't have the connections. They don't know where to start. And so the fact that we have a City Center and we have a director of the City Center that wants to partner with communities to provide opportunities, that will get much easier for groups if you do serve projects. And so that'll be a big part of that as well. Group discussion, talk through the study, talk through God's Word, a 1-year commitment from group leaders. And then we want to ask you to do that multiplication like we talked about. Send one couple, receive one couple, or individual. Okay, that's community groups. That feels really familiar for many of you, okay? Not much changes there. Catalyst groups is the next one. Catalyst groups are designed to help you find your people. Whether you are newer to Crossroads or have never been in a group before, these groups give you a snapshot of what it's like to be in a community group. So this is kind of this is just a picture of like where we want to take people through Catalyst groups to community groups. We give the group leader everything that they need to learn how to lead or be in a group, as well as leading you through curriculum to help you grow in your walk with Christ. And so many of you should have received a little second packet when you came in that has a graphic at the top that says Colossians. That's a sample, that's a snapshot of what our Catalyst curriculum will look like for the fall. And we'll talk about that a little bit more here in just a moment as well. The Catalyst group material will be what we consider kind of the cream of the crop. Okay, it's kind of the cream of the crop curriculum. Ooh, that's a lot of C's. Yeah. That makes me, my alliteration, yeah. that meter just went nuts right there. The cream of the crop curriculum, man, that makes me so happy. Carefully selected by the community's ministry leadership to provide excellent teaching that also reflects Crossroads core values, know, grow, go. We will rotate a handful of curriculums to keep things fresh for people who may need to jump into a Catalyst group for multiple semesters. Maybe they can't get into a community group for whatever reason. They just need to keep taking Catalyst groups. We'll keep that rotation fresh so it's not the same every semester or every other semester. We'll also provide leadership training at the beginning of each semester for the upcoming curriculum. So, having said that Colossians, we are going to start a sermon series on the book of Colossians in October. And so our Catalyst groups for this fall, we're going to create some content in-house that goes along with that sermon series, a little bit like Keys to Freedom. Keys to Freedom was a little bit of a test drive for us to see how this worked. And what I heard overwhelmingly from all of you folks is that you loved it. Like, there was a certain amount of unity that came with that, and it seemed to be refreshing. So this is going to be a very mini picture of what we did with Keys to Freedom. It's not going to be an all-church campaign or discipleship journey, but for our Catalyst groups, this is what they'll go through. And we'll provide all of that. And I hope, let me just say this without asking, I hope that those of you who have led, certainly through Keys to Freedom, I hope you found that the discussion guides, the leader content was very user-friendly. It made your job way easier. That's what we're trying to do moving forward. Specifically with Colossians, we've got some other studies that are in the bank, so to speak, that we'll use in the future. How many of you have been through or taught Rooted? Anybody been through or taught Rooted? Those of you who have been through it, you know how impactful it is. That's going to be one that we will save for the right semester, and we'll have some different ones that we continue. And so if any of you feel like, hey, I've done this content, I've done this specific study, I think this would be really good for our Catalyst groups, and it's somewhere between like 8 to 10 weeks. Let us know. We're open to suggestions if you've done a study that you think would be really good for many groups to go through at the same time. So you've got those handouts. You can kind of look at what the discussion guides are going to look like. The information provided at semester launches are going to focus more on locations and meeting times and leader info and group demographics. All group signups will move to a digital platform. That's another thing. You guys, we are spending thousands of dollars a year on these printed catalogs that look really nice, but man, it's busting our budget in ways that is not necessary, that this next generation is already, everything is digital. And so we're moving that direction, certainly. So we're not going to do the mass printed catalogs, as cool as they look and as proud of them as I am every semester. I think we're going to move everything onto a digital platform to save that money in our budget. And I think it's just better stewardship overall. And so we'll work with people. I know some people are like, oh, QR codes, I can't stand them. I don't want to get online and sign up for something. I just want a piece of paper. I get it. We'll work through some of that, okay? Some of you are looking around like, yeah, that's me. I don't like QR codes. Okay. After completing a Catalyst group, the attendees will be encouraged to remain together to create a new community group if they can. It's not a must. It's certainly encouraged, and we want to see that. We want to see these Catalyst groups form maybe 8 to 10 weeks, and the people that get together say, man, this is the first group I've been a part of. Let's just stay together. And then turn it into a community group where people feel like they found their people. Attendees not interested in staying with the group may also join another community group with an open seat. So there's always an off-ramp kind of for people. If that Catalyst group didn't work for them at the end of 8 weeks, they can find another Catalyst group. They can try to get into a community group if they'd like. For me, on the next page, Catalyst group leaders will identify and develop potential community group leaders within their group. How many of you led a Keys to Freedom group again? Just raise your hand. Okay, how many of you would say, I didn't necessarily talk to someone about leading a group, but I've got someone in my group that I thought they could potentially lead a group like this? Anybody? Okay, so of all the hands that went up, maybe another half of them went up right there. This is where we have failed as leaders, is to identify those next leaders. And so we want these Catalyst groups to be able to say at the beginning, like, hey, we're gonna be together for 8 weeks, but we're looking for someone that might be willing to lead this group moving forward should it stay together. So we want to identify new group leaders and develop them in their potential. And then a Catalyst group leader may also become the community group leader if they want to stay. So let's say, I don't know, let's say the Teresa's are leading a community group. They send someone from their group to start a Catalyst group, okay? They lead a Catalyst group for 1 semester. That group leader can either then, at the end of that semester, come back to the original group, or they can just keep leading that Catalyst group into a community group. So we want to give options there. We're not trying to force anything. We're not trying to just break up groups and destroy unity, but what we're trying to do is encourage multiplication and push you guys a little bit in that way. And I think what you're going to find, Josh, I'm going to keep picking at you, okay? Because I'm in Josh's group. I know the culture of that group. I know some of the success he's had as a group leader. It's not that hard to find people, is it? If you're looking for leaders, if you're intentional about it, you can find them in your groups. And when you set the culture of like, this is what we're going to do, like people typically rise up to that. They know, okay, somebody from our group is going to go this year and they're going to start another group and maybe they'll be back after that group, but I think they'll rise up to the challenge if you guys will set that forward. Gathering expectations for Catalyst groups. This is a little bit shorter than the previous one, right? So we still want prayer to be a big focus. We still want some food and some fellowship. We certainly still want Bible study and service, and we want discussion questions. So notice what I didn't put down there. I didn't put that it's expected that Catalyst groups either multiply or that leaders stay with their Catalyst group for a year, okay? Most Catalyst groups will know, I'm leading this for 1 semester. And if they want to keep leading another Catalyst group, I know we will have some group leaders that say, I just want to be a Catalyst group leader. That's great, okay? And you'll do that from semester to semester, maybe twice a year, maybe once a year, but there's no year-long commitment with leading a Catalyst group, okay? Now, let's focus on care groups really briefly. This is something that we're excited about, and I think something that's really going to bless our church, because you guys know, you look around and you see the brokenness of people. You see the further we get away from Christ, the more broken people are, and we're certainly seeing that even amongst Christians in our church. People have issues, man, and we all have issues, man. Like I have issues. And so we want to provide some care groups that are a little bit more ongoing. In the past, we've had groups like groups for widows, and we've had groups like Grief Share and Divorce Care and Financial Peace University and a few other things, and they've been great, and we're going to continue to do those. But what we're thinking about care groups is that this becomes maybe less of like a semester-based type of group and becomes more of like a ministry. So we will have people, and Jeff Anderson, our care pastor here, Jeff, raise your hand real quick. If you do not know him, get to know Jeff. He has a wonderful heart of mercy for people, and he will slow down with you. He's so good. So anyways, he's our care pastor, and he will tell you, like, he is advocating on behalf of people that come forward at the end of services, like, hey, I'm hearing this is what people need. What do you think about a group for this? And I'm like, oh, Jeff, slow down. No, I'm half kidding there. But like Jeff knows what the needs of our people are, because his team of volunteers are receiving them after the service. And so what we need is, certainly Financial Peace is great, and Divorce Care is great, and Grief Share is great, but what happens when someone loses a loved one in between semesters? What happens when a marriage is on the rocks and the next Divorce Care doesn't start for another 4 months? You know, so we want to provide some care groups, or almost that feels more like ministries, that provide ongoing care. They may not meet every week and do a formal study, but Jeff then knows if someone comes forward and says, hey, this person is struggling with like suicidal thoughts or tendencies, certainly we'll get them in contact with a pastor or one of our mental health team members, but we might provide some groups where even if that group is not meeting on a weekly basis, the leader of that group can reach out and say, hey, how can I pray for you and encourage you right now? And so we want this to be ongoing, because people's problems don't stop just because we don't have community groups and classes going And so that's going to feel that's going to be what we call care ministries. Jake is working pretty heavily on that, getting that up and going. We're going to have some stuff for sexual purity. We're going to have some stuff for finances. We're going to have some stuff for grief and divorce, some different mental health things as well. And we're going to build that ministry and those care groups based off of, first of all, what are our needs? And second of all, who is God bringing us to lead these groups? Because many of them are very, it's almost like you have to go through it in order to really counsel someone through it. And so whoever God provides us, that's what we're going to consider expanding those care groups and that care ministry. So, what is this? Let's look at the gathering expectations for care groups. Again, this will only affect a small portion of you in this room, but we want some easy on-ramps to receive care for people, and the response time at the end of the service has been a tremendous win for our campuses, all of our campuses, for people to be able to go forward and say, man, I'm struggling with pornography, or I'm struggling with forgiving my husband because of his pornography, whatever it might be, whether it's grief, whether it's kids that are rebelling and playing the prodigal, all these things. We want easy on-ramps for people to get care in the moment, or at least very quickly from when they first identify themselves. Regular availability and ongoing care, Bible studies and service, prayer focus, and group discussion. And so that's what it's going to look like for care groups. All right, so it's 1:32. I'm 3 minutes ahead of schedule. That's never happened before. So let's just go ahead and kill some time. Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Jake. Jake's going to give you a little bit of like, okay, what does this mean? You've heard a lot from me right now, and I know I've hit you with the fire hose, right? There's a lot of information. That's why we give you the packets, so that you can take these home, you can chew on it, you can process it, you can try to figure out how does my group move forward in light of this? We don't necessarily need you to have it all figured out today. We're still figuring some of this out. But Jake is going to give you kind of the path forward, like, what does that mean for your group now, for those of you, obviously, who have been leading groups? And then we're going to give you just about 10 minutes for question and answers at the end. Okay? Jake, take it away.
So, for a lot of you, like what Chris said, this really isn't going to change much for you at all. Some of you guys are looking at some of these expectations and you're like, I'm blowing all these out of the water and I'm doing even more. Great job. For some of you guys, like what Chris said, this might be a little bit of an earthquake. It might feel like a little bit like things are getting kind of shaky. This is really what my group isn't about. That's okay. We want to be here to support you guys throughout these transitions as much as possible. What we want to do is make you into disciple makers. Okay? That's what we're here to do. And so we want to help you do that through relationships, through connection, and give our people here at our church as many opportunities as possible to find their people and grow in the relationship with Jesus through their relationships with other people, and through the study of God's Word together, and through prayer, and through eating, and through having fun, all of those things, okay? And what this means for you is that, honestly, in reality, with all of our groups becoming more focused, you're going to have more access to us. We're going to be much more focused on where we're taking our groups into the future. You're going to have a lot more opportunities to invite those friends that you know at work, or those family members, to get into this ministry in a lot easier ways, whether your group is full or not. Because you know that every semester we're going to have opportunities for people that are new to find their people, okay? What this also means is this gives you an opportunity to lead more holistically. Okay, we want to give you guys opportunities to really stretch and build some of those leadership muscles that you guys have, to really find the ways that the Lord has equipped you through your spiritual gifts and your abilities to lead the groups that you are overseeing. So we talked a little bit about food and fellowship and some of those things. I burn cereal, okay? I can't cook at all, right? That is probably the one that's the scariest for me. But what I do know is that I'm leading my group, okay? And part of leadership is recognizing the gifts and talents that the Lord has given to people in your group. So maybe you don't have the space to have people gather in your home, but somebody else does. Ask them to step up and use what the Lord, or ask them to use what the Lord has given them to contribute to the church. Maybe you can't cook, but you know somebody else in your group that can. Ask them to provide something. You know, This gives you an opportunity as a leader to know your groups in more intimate ways and to lead them more intentionally, to use their gifts and talents to serve and spread the gospel. And so, really, again, it doesn't really mean a ton for you, but we do know that you have a lot of questions, okay? We do have on the back of this packet some frequently asked questions. And we want to give you guys the space to read through some of those things, maybe to ask them as well. But also, maybe you wrote a question down and you want to see what Chris and I have to say about it. We're going to give you guys the space to get those questions answered. So, with that being said, I just want to open it up to you guys and hear what you have to say or questions you have.
And I think this really looks good, by the way. And in some of the, like, I think even Keys of Freedom was a pilot experiment, which set us on a good path. One thing that I noticed that I didn't see clearly established in the go forward plan, we had as kind of a deficiency, no clear metrics for success. How has that been addressed in the path forward? Do we have key performance indicators that we're going to be measuring?
Yeah, so again, we are looking at those expectations of every group leader for them to be able to provide for their groups. We're going to ask group leaders how these things are going every time or every semester. So again, since we're more focused on where we're taking this ministry, we're going to have more space and more clear direction for you as a group leader, and to be able to ask you and hold you accountable to some of these things. And even on top of that, those group expectations give you people that you are leading the idea of what they can expect. So I know when I go to group, this is what we're going to do, and there's consistency there. And so, but as far as like what we're measuring, it's going to be easier to measure how many more groups we are gaining every single semester, what group retention looks like, what multiplication looks like, how we're actually growing, like in the things that we are trying to accomplish specifically. Because to be honest, like this has been a little bit of a difficult point of measuring in the past. We'll have a couple people that join 3 different groups because they're trying to, like, they want to go golfing, they want to have their Bible study, and they, want to be in the cooking group. That's 3 different registrations. It's been hard to count, like, okay, is that one person or is that 3 different people? And honestly, guys, Keys to Freedom was an amazing opportunity for us to see what we actually can do as far as what we're measuring. We were absolutely blown away by the amount of people that got into Keys to Freedom groups. And we want to make sure that we know, okay, this person is in a community group, this is their community group, and it's going to be much easier to count them. And so it really does give us a better pulse on how healthy our group involvement is. So keeping things as focused as possible. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Yeah.
Is this curriculum that's offered to the Catalyst group available for community group?
Absolutely. Great question. Love that question. This is what I'm really, really excited about as well. So you guys all of you guys like Keys to Freedom groups, you got what we're calling our just-in-time emails. So you guys remember getting those? I think they came out on Thursdays? Wednesday or Thursday or something for the week before. That's going to be our rhythm movement going forward for every single group leader. So if you're signed up to be a group leader, community group leaders are going to too. But we're on the same page, I promise. You will get that just-in-time email that will have announcements for the church that's coming up. You will have training materials that we will provide, even like answering some questions like, hey, we heard from 3 or 4 different group leaders that this has been a problem this semester. We want to address this thing as the communities department. But we'll also feature that discussion guide that you can bring your community group through as well. And you will have access to these going backward. So if you don't want to do Colossians this fall, but you'd like to do it in the spring, you got all those emails and you have access to all those discussion guides anyway. So
we can get those to our people prior to that sermon.
Yes. Yep. So they are written and designed for you to lead from. We really want you guys to have the tools that you need to lead, but not just lead necessarily from the perspective of content creation. To be really focused in your prep time on prayer and what's going on in your people's lives and building community and connection with people. So if content creation or leadership is not your forte, but you really like to host and you really like to cook and you really are close with people, then you know that you have a discussion guide that you can just walk through. And you can ask those questions, and then you're going to hit these markers that we're asking the group leaders to hit, and you're going to grow in your biblical literacy. So, yeah. So, does that answer your question? So everybody gets these, yeah, you can always go backwards as well. But they are focused mostly on leading within catalyst groups. So, yeah.
Ralph and I, with the next season's group, we've our group meets weekly now throughout the year.
Yeah.
How will we be able to promote our group in the fall? Because we go alternate teaching different subjects, different topics. How will we be able to advertise our group?
Yeah, that's a great question. So,
can I speak to that? Yeah. This is something I've been wrestling with. I feel like maybe somewhere in the document it says we're only going to advertise catalyst groups in the online or whatever, because most community groups are closed. I've really been wrestling with this because there are some community groups that are willing to receive people. So I feel like we still need to have opportunity to advertise some community groups that are open. So if I can answer that, I don't know that we have the answer to it yet, but it's something I'm like, I think that we need to address this problem in our model going forward. That maybe we haven't quite perfected. In our heads, like 9 months ago, I think we had it figured out. But then you start talking to more people and you're like, oh yeah, well their community group, they're starting one, but they only have 2 people. Like, how do we help them? We have to figure that out.
Okay.
So, sorry, I just butted in, but
no, you're good.
I was literally wrestling with this last night. What's the answer to that question? So,
an answer that I do have to that question as well is that there is another level of relational invitation that we want to encourage leaders to participate in. And so, like, you can have your group, and it could be an open community group that we will figure out how to advertise and stuff as well. But as a community group, once a year, like, you're sending somebody almost like a missionary to lead a catalyst group. And so in that relationship that you guys are building with one of these catalyst groups that you're praying for because you know the person that's leading it who's a part of your group, maybe you're even coaching them about how to do it well, and you're getting reports on how it's going, and maybe even you consider this catalyst group leader to be a missionary that you are sending, and you want to support that group specifically. Maybe you cook dinner for them. Maybe you have a game night with them or something. But that's an opportunity for you to relationally as well and say, hey, come to our group. We got this open going on as well. We would love to have you. So,
well, perhaps I know with the other community groups, it would be if there's a someone who comes new here, you can direct them toward the community groups that are open.
Yeah. And so, we'll do that. We'll do that online as well. Yeah, Jay.
What are the dates of your semesters?
So, do you have the October dates?
Whatever the first Sunday in October, I don't know who asked the question.
Jay.
Whatever the first Sunday in October is, it feels like the 5th. The 6th. Okay, that's when the fall semester starts.
It'd be the 5th though, because it's Saturday night.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So when's it?
Right before Thanksgiving, I believe. Or no, it's going to go just past Thanksgiving, I think. I have to look at the dates, but we're looking at 8 weeks.
It'll operate pretty similarly to where September we'll do signups for people. Like, we'll open up registration for that, and then that people can start their groups in October.
I'm down at the city center on Tuesday morning, and there's days, people guests will come in for laundry service. Some days I have 2 people, some days 8.
Yeah.
I've been doing it since the city center opened up, and I have tried books, I've tried stuff to take home, bring back in, and I've had 0 response overall this year. How can I do something like this? It's just, what I've been doing is just some teachings on accounts administrators verse by verse, which works great because they're games down in something, and a little closet, a lot of discussion. Okay, I have tried, all the stuff over the years, with the, path you guys want to do, I think it's
You mean like you're at?
It's hit and miss sometimes.
Right.
There are folks that are, they're homeless or, and, some of them come just to get breakfast.
Sure.
And sit on the stairs for Bible study, and, but I want to keep it going, because I feel God is letting me do that. Because he's bringing the ones up here, and.
Right.
And a lot of people mess with going, I just would rather do, these platforms you guys want to.
Sure. Sure. Yeah.
I'm happy doing what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But, I want to try to follow what you guys want to.
Yeah. I want to give you an opportunity if you want to talk about it.
Mark, I think that's probably something for us to have a conversation outside of this space. How can we help you? Because some of you guys do have some unique situations with your groups. You want to play along, but you're like, I'm not sure. How does this work? I could probably spend an hour with every unique every unique group leader saying this is how it works. Some of this we have not come up with all the answers with, for yet. So I think that's probably a conversation for us to have outside of this, like how can we help you adopt this model? So good question.
I can give you a little more in depth than what I do.
Yeah. And the good thing is I think we have some time. So not a whole lot of time, but we got some time to figure that out.
Take us all over here too, and we'll come back over this one.
Chris mentioned Right Now Media.
Yeah.
Is that like a website you can go to and get curriculum?
Yes. Yeah. So we offer that to every group leader. If you're not on Right Now Media right now, please let us know. We will get you into Right Now Media. It is awesome. It's so good.
Is that a subscription that Crossroads is in?
Yes, we provide that for you guys as group leaders. It basically has like full video series with curriculum and even like some discussion guides built into some of the series as well, that can make it easy to complete your group.
Is that more recommended than just doing the deeper study? Because for about 3 years, 4 years, we've been doing just the deeper study,
Sure.
other than Keys to Freedom.
Yeah, it just depends on what your group is looking to grow in, and so as long as it's meeting, or as long as it's trying to grow you in one of those 3 core values that we have here, it's okay. If you're a community group leader and, it's contributing to one of those 3 core values, you're good. So, and we'll obviously want to know what you're doing, because we want to encourage you. There might be a better curriculum that does the same thing, and we can offer an opportunity, or vice versa.
Are you
So-
saying that we need to have a curriculum versus following just the deeper study? Just
No.
No,
You can do what we offer you in the just-in-time email as well. Yeah, so whichever one you want to do. Yeah. So that's kind of one of the beauties of being a community group leader, rather than just a Catalyst group leader, is that you know what your group needs to grow in, and you can lead them in that specifically. So, yeah.
I'm currently reading for the discipleship Bible study and preparing my next people to move on. I'm assuming we're still carrying that program.
Yeah.
We're still doing that and making our disciples.
Yeah, core groups will continue.
Okay.
They'll continue kind of under the radar
Okay.
as they have been up until, some of you are here in core groups, you're like, I don't even know what that is. They've kind of flown under the radar, and so certainly we want to encourage those to keep going.
Yes.
They're not going to fall under like the 3 types of groups that we're really promoting.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, we want those like in-depth discipleship groups to continue on. So if your ladies want to multiply in that way,
Yes.
we're encouraging that. But we've never really been out front with core groups and really pushing them in the first place, because it doesn't fall perfectly within our model. And people want to get into them, but we may not have enough group leaders. And so we don't feel like currently we have the structure to make it a part of our entire community's model, if that makes sense. So yes, they can continue forward to answer your question.
Okay.
Can we answer, Tristan, I saw your hand. Can we take one last question? I want to really respect your guys' time. It's 1:50. Let's take one last question, and then if you have a question after we dismiss, certainly come talk to Jake or I, and we'll help you. But I want to release people that need to go.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead.
I got the last one.
Get the last one, bub.
Are you expecting the catalyst groups to kind of follow up a weekly meeting for 8 weeks and the community groups to be more of a once every other week kind of model, or is it?
Yeah, so
I feel like the response in Keys to Freedom was, you guys are great, but boy, we get a lot of each other. And agendas and schedules, especially with our demographic.
Yeah.
What's the expectation?
So for catalyst groups, we are expecting weekly, and that is mainly because for situations like this upcoming Colossians series, it is matching up kind of like what Keys to Freedom did with the sermons. And so my boy Nick back here has been working really hard with some of our other teaching pastors on putting together a discussion guide that is also paired up with what you guys are going to be getting in your just-in-time emails. So the questions that you're going to be asking if you're a Catalyst group leader will mesh extremely well with the discussion guide that's going to be made for that series. But as far as community groups go, we toyed with like part of one of those expectations being at least every other week. We would like you guys to really try to do that. You know, at least try to do every other week. We didn't make it super explicit on any documentation because we know sometimes life gets in the way. But if you're keeping it regular, at least you know that you're doing life with people, and when life does get in the way, there's people there to support you. So yeah, for Catalyst groups weekly. Even I don't know many people that were upset that they made friends in Keys to Freedom, and that they got to see them weekly, honestly. And I, to be honest, man, I don't know how you go through something like a Keys to Freedom and not want to spend more time with people, and not feel like you came out the other side with deeper relationships and growing in your walk with Christ. So unless someone was just a real stinker in your group, and you know, at that point, I don't know. We'll
Let's
chase
all
them
just
out.
commit to using that word once today, stinker. To kind of go a little bit further, Tristan, because yes, we'd like to see those catalyst groups go weekly, but I also understand, I know your travel schedule, right? Like there might be a week where you're like, I can't host this week. Maybe you find someone else in your group that can host. Maybe on an extreme circumstance, like, hey, I just can't meet this week or whatever. So we're not gonna be like, hey, if you can't meet 100% of the time with your catalyst group, then don't have it. But we are asking like, hey, make weekly be the rhythm. And if you have to take a week off because of schedules, we understand that. There's obviously some flexibility there. But.
For sure.
And that does fall under.
Basically, like every other week in perpetuity, regardless if there's a semester going or not.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And that does kind of fall under what I said, like when we kind of got started about what this means for you as a group leader. It's broadening the horizons of what leadership looks like for you. Because if you are leading a Catalyst group and you're looking for that leader and you can't be there, you know that you can give them the discussion guide that they can lead through super easily, point by point. And you know that part of what you're doing is trying to find someone to take these people and go lead them for the next year, you know? And so it's stretching us a little bit, but I think it's gonna really grow us and make us healthier, so. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Let's give Jake a round of applause. Thank you guys for being here. I know we threw a lot at you. This doesn't answer every question. We're going to ask a couple of things going forward. We want you to go with us. Think about what our church needs in the fall. What we desperately need groups. And that's just where we're at as a church, and groups can be a great unifier for the church body. So we want you to go on this journey with us. And then the second thing we want you to consider is like just be praying and be patient as we work through some of because again, every one of you have different circumstances. We couldn't think through everything, but we want to work with you in this. Our goal is not to say, you can't play along 100%, so therefore you're not with us at all. You're not against us, and we're certainly not against you. So work with us as we kind of work with you, and maybe just show some grace and some patience as we work through the kinks, because the first semester might be a little bit, at least leading up to the first semester, might be a little bit rough at times and rocky at times, but we're going to do our best to serve you guys well. I hope you feel loved. I hope you feel heard. I hope you feel encouraged moving forward, because we are excited about this. Again, a year and a half in the making this has been, and so we really want to see what the Lord's going to do, and we want you to go on that journey with us, because certainly we can't do it without you. So thanks again for being here. Let me close in prayer, and then you guys can be dismissed. Heavenly Father, thanks again.